From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and here's what's ahead. Out of the Livestock Marketing Information Center, Katelyn McCullock will provide this week's comments on the cattle markets. She'll talk about yet another week of higher fed cattle prices. And Katelyn will offer her latest thoughts on the impact of the extended drought in the West and in the Plains states on the cattle inventory heading into 2022. Then, K-State's Megan Niederwerder will report on her upcoming new research on another aspect of African swine fever. And this time, her project will center on what would happen at the hog farm level if ASF actually managed to enter the U.S., and what the best control response would be in those circumstances. All that and more here on Agriculture Today. Glad to have you along with us for this Agriculture Today. And first off, we'll find out what's going on in the cattle markets. Quite favorable tone there, as we'll visit once again with the director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center based in Denver, Katelyn McCullock. It's funny, Katelyn, that our fed cattle market for so many weeks running would hardly budge. And now we've had a string of several weeks of higher money paid for cattle. So quite encouraging.
It seems like almost the opposite, in which I'm not sure where we're going to slow down. So on Friday, the cash trade for the 5-area live steers hit 140 per hundredweight, which is a very, very good price for this time of year and in general. If we look at where the cattle supplies are on feed, we'll get another update of that later this month, but it appears packers are chasing cattle right now, and those feedlots are benefiting from that.
And demand has to be holding pretty well, particularly with the holidays going on. There are no demand woes apparent there, Katelyn.
I think you're right. There's been domestically probably some holiday buying that has gone on in the last couple of weeks. We should be wrapping that up. If you think about how long it takes to harvest those animals and then get them on the shelf, we're probably towards the tail end of that. But the other thing you got to consider is New Year's in February, and with shipping times on that end, you're probably seeing some of the beef bought going overseas are trying to time that holiday market as well. We can talk about export sales to China. We have new monthly trade data coming out later this week. We can look at weekly trade data, which is a little bit more current than that monthly data. And this week, we're going to see the monthly data come out for October. When you look at what's happened on the weekly side between October and November, just for those 2 months so far, China is up 48% over that time frame last year. And that's just in that 2-month window. Most of our other markets are down, so that's making up for some of those volumes. Some of the other markets that are up, South Korea is up about 9% in those 2 months. Chile is up 21%. But some of our major markets like Mexico is down quite a bit. Hong Kong, you may have some shifting from gray markets there, but that's down year over year quite a bit. And so one of the questions we have is what's going to happen next year after such a good beef export year in 2021. What does that look like moving forward, especially when you consider most of the driving factors have come from only a few destinations showing positive year-over-year growth.
So do you have any preconceived ideas on where that might be headed in 2022? It's a tall order to answer that question, understood, but any thoughts?
From a volume perspective, we are expecting beef exports to pull back, but because prices are probably going to still remain so high, probably on a total value, you might not lose very much. It's a very normal sort of situation to have a very high, strong beef export year followed by a couple years where that volume number slips a bit. And so that's what we're expecting. That doesn't mean beef exports won't be still a very large number by historical perspectives, but that you probably won't see another year that's able to outpace 2021 by double-digit growth like we saw 2021 due to 2020.
Let's roll back to the markets this past week, if we might, on the feeder cattle side. Looking at the auctions in the Kansas area and maybe just the Central Plains in general, there is a fairly consistent uptone noted there, and one wonders if the potential for profiting from finishing cattle is starting to spur on more demand for those calves at auctions.
These December bought feeder cattle, depending on that weight group, that's going to come out about mid-2022. And if you look at the futures board, I don't know if we've ever seen such a high June. I haven't actually gone back and looked, but we were approaching 140 in June, which was pretty crazy from an overall perspective. Now it's come down a little bit, but I think feedlots are looking at those pretty high summer quarter prices and thinking that they can actively lock in a price, especially when you consider how corn has behaved. I mean, it's really come off those highs that we saw earlier. We are very likely to get a bigger corn crop this coming year, and that should persistently drive that corn price to lower and lower cost of gain on the feedlot side. The other thing you have to consider is how open the winter has been for the Southern Plains, Colorado. We are missing snow right now, but what that does allow is that cattle are performing very well inside these feedlots. They're not dealing with mud, they're not dealing with cold, and they're able to eat and turn that feed efficiency way up and probably put on some pretty good gains at a pretty good efficient rate. And so I think that's somewhat playing into the feeder cattle market. And I think a lot of those things kind of go across the board because we saw all the weight groups last week jump up from the pre-Thanksgiving week. We had 4 to 450 jump $20 per hundredweight in Dodge City. And across the board, probably most of the categories of weight groups gained probably in that $10 range if they were under 700 pounds, maybe a little bit less if they were above 700 pounds, but all looking much better than they were a week or two ago.
Katelyn, you mentioned the open weather as part of the catalyst there. Well, the other edge of that open weather sword, to put it that way, is the dryness that's gone with it. And that brings us to thoughts about the drought that has lingered so long in so many parts of the West as well as the northern plains. Whether we're going to see evidence of strained forage supplies here heading into the winter.
So hay is always very regional, but the pretty blanket statement is that the West in general has very tight hay supplies, and that some other regions, northern, southern plains, may have some pockets where things are still pretty tight. The problem is going to be, this is going to be the third year, right, that you're going to see a year-over-year decline in probably December stocks and May 1 stocks, which is going to allow for hay prices to stay very high through most of, for at least the start of the growing season of next year. Now, depending on how tight they are, maybe you get a little bit of buffer when you take off first cutting or second cutting. Maybe it's a little bit later. I mean, you are going to be probably looking at historically low stocks in a lot of states. The December 1 hay stocks won't come out until later this month, and May 1 won't come out till the end of May or a little bit later. And so we don't know necessarily what that positioning is. I mean, the open weather will allow for, if you don't have any pasture, it doesn't really help you, right? You'll need to supplemental feed if that pasture has been overgrazed because there just hasn't been enough moisture to keep those pastures healthy. And so for a lot of these areas, you have been supplemental feeding for the better part of 2 years, and that probably is going to have to continue through winter this year, regardless of if we get moisture or not. And that will be a continuation that is going to hurt a lot of producers. Now, we've already seen liquidation in a lot of states, and it does not appear to be slowing down. So about a month or so ago, we were thinking maybe this fourth quarter might show beef cow slaughter below a year ago. That hasn't seemed like it's happened. So we've seen greater numbers of cows that even we saw last year, and the last 2 years have seen very high fourth quarters. And so from a breeding herd perspective, we're probably looking at down probably more than 2% right now on January 1. And that's really going to contract cattle supplies moving forward for the next several years. But that's also going to help support your prices.
That'll bear monitoring. We'll be looking forward to that report from the USDA, the latter end of January, that cattle inventory update. So before we let you go, we have a very bullish situation, have for several weeks in the fed cattle market. As we head into 2022, is this going to continue, or will we see a leveling off of this trade, Katelyn?
I could tell you what normally happens, Eric, but I don't know if this is going to be a normal sort of situation. Usually you don't see December hit such a high point, and usually you would see, that April quarter take out anything that had happened in that fourth quarter. We'll have to see how December averages out. I mean, if you think about where cash cattle have been, you get October averaging about 124, I believe. And if you see December hit more like, I don't even want to wager a guess, but something in the 130s, that's a huge spread for this quarter and very atypical. And so that makes you wonder, what does that pattern look like moving through the first half of the year? Normally, you would see a fairly strong first half of the year. We were expecting the peak price to still happen in the second quarter, normal declines in the June and that summer quarter before coming back up in that December quarter. So that's what normally happens. I no longer want to guess, I guess, if April is going to be higher than this fourth quarter of 2021. We've seen a ton of strength in this cash cattle market. And on the boxed beef side, that has held up surprisingly well. I mean, we've really seen that stabilize on the choice side, bounce around a couple of dollars, I guess, last week, but not seeing maybe the $2, $3, $5 swings day to day that we were seeing earlier this year. And I think what cash cattle is really going to depend on is how this packer margin behaves. It seems like we're moving back to, from a margin perspective, a more similar to historical level, in that it's getting a little compressed by that cash cattle side, but it's not necessarily small. It's just shrinking from that large level that it was before. But that's going to be what we're watching and probably going to help determine what they can pay for cattle moving forward.
Well, you said it. What passes for normal these days is anybody's guess. But for the here and now, it's good vibes out of these markets. And Katelyn, as always, we appreciate your input. In advance, happy holidays, and we'll talk with you in the new year once more. Many thanks.
Thank you, Eric.
Katelyn McCullock on the cattle markets. Katelyn is the director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center, which is based in Denver. We'll return with more. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Welcome back. You are listening to Agriculture Today. Quite a collection of scientists here at Kansas State University in recent years have been focusing their attention on this swine disease that has caused so much devastation in other parts of the world. Thankfully, not here in the U.S., and hopefully we can keep it that way. But regardless, African swine fever has researchers' full attention, including that of our guest now, who will be working with a new grant to learn more about the transmission and survival of African swine fever, or ASF, in the farm setting. Megan Niederwerder is with us. She is an assistant professor of diagnostic medicine and pathobiology here at Kansas State University's College of Veterinary Medicine. Megan, we probably should remind a little more about the severity of ASF and where we stand on the world stage with this disease.
Yes. Well, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you today. And it is important to remind everyone where African swine fever virus is currently located. Over the last decade or so, this virus has really spread at unprecedented rates into countries such as China and recently Germany, as well as even more recently the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And so when we think about where African swine fever virus, it is spread recently to these new countries and areas, but it is currently not in the United States. And of course, we're doing everything we can to prevent entry of the virus.
Now, you have been directly working on aspects of this virus previously, right?
Yes, a lot of our work historically at the Biosecurity Research Institute at Kansas State has been to investigate risks of introduction. And we've primarily focused our research on the import of specific feed ingredients, looking at the stability of the virus in those feed ingredients. Can the virus survive in imported feed ingredients? And how do we mitigate that risk? Really trying to think about, can we prevent the virus from entering the country through risks such as imported feed ingredients?
This new effort that you'll be undertaking, though, again supported by a $500,000 grant, will take a different tack, though. It's, in essence, a what-if the virus does, in fact, find its way into the U.S. and our swine industry, right?
Yes, and I think it's important to consider both the prevention of the virus from entering the country, but then also have this preparedness plan for if the virus does enter. Of course, we want to do everything we can to prevent entry, but we also need to have the tools and protocols and practices ready to go should the virus enter into our country. And so when we think about this new grant and our shift sort of goes to our preparedness side, what would we do if the virus enters, and how would we eradicate and eliminate the virus as quickly as possible from the farm to restock and raise healthy pigs?
We want to stress that this will not be an actual on-farm, out in the open trial by any stretch of the imagination. It will be fully biosecure in a laboratory setting?
Correct, yes. So we do all of the work with African swine fever virus in our biosafety level 3 facility. And that is a high biocontainment facility that allows us to work directly with the virus in a safe setting. And it is important that all the work that we do is in the laboratory setting. So we are really simulating the on-farm environment. We are not utilizing an actual farm.
I want to make sure all are clear on that.
Yes.
Then what on-farm protocols will you and your team be evaluating?
Yes. So one of the things that has been discovered since the introduction of the virus onto new areas in other parts of the world is that this virus is very stable and can survive for weeks to months in certain environmental matrices. So one of the things that's been highlighted, of course, is in pork products. But when we also think about the on-farm environment, we have to think about the excretions from the pigs. So fecal matter, the lagoons, the actual on-farm penning. We have to think about if this virus is so stable, how can we confirm and validate best practices to feel very confident that the virus has been eliminated from the farm and is not being harbored in any environmental matrices such as manure. And so we really want to understand and define these best practices for confirming elimination of the virus. So again, we can go back to raising healthy pigs on those same environments.
One presumes because there is not a vaccine or treatment for this disease, and we'll talk more about that in just a second, that depopulation of a contaminated herd is still part and parcel of the protocol. It has to be. Is that correct?
Yes. And so when you think about if the virus was introduced, one of the factors that's going to be really important for our industry to reduce potential losses is rapid diagnostic identification of the virus being entered. And so this goes back to a really important role of producers and veterinarians, of course, identifying clinical signs that could be consistent with the virus, doing foreign animal disease investigations, and diagnosing the virus as quickly as possible. The second step to that would, of course, be eliminating infected animals and then eliminating the virus from any environmental contamination so that we can, again, make sure that these farms are clean and able to raise healthy pigs.
It sounds like, Megan, a daunting task to clean up a farm to the extent where that virus will no longer exist and will not infect a repopulated herd. What are you thinking about getting to that point?
Yes. So a couple of areas that are important for this investigation and ongoing research in this area is looking at how do we eliminate the virus through composting, through the pigs that are eliminated that have been infected, but then also looking at tools for inactivating the virus. So can we use a heat protocol to increase the heat or temperature of the internal environment or even external environment? Are there disinfectants or even other chemicals that could eliminate the virus in the presence of fecal matter or other organic material. So we want to make sure that the protocols that we have in place completely eliminate the virus, because our ultimate goal would be, if the virus, first of all, prevention of the virus entering, of course, and then if the virus enters, we want to identify and eradicate as quickly as possible because of the trade implications that occur to our country. The more rapidly we can eliminate the virus, the lower the economic losses for producers due to that loss of trade.
This is going to be very important work, and you'll be conducting this over, the next year or two? What's the plan?
The next 2 years, we plan to initiate the study and work through some of the aspects that we've discussed. We also have other ongoing studies for African swine fever, looking at improving diagnostic assays, novel surveillance techniques, and also, again, looking at the virus stability in feed and feed matrices and mitigation tools for that. And so we have multiple facets for the research, really, again, trying to prevent entry, but also prepare the country for potential entry of the virus.
It really is all hands on deck. And
yes.
This project will lend a great deal in that respect. Quickly here, though, vaccination response to African swine fever. One hears about the development of a vaccine maybe coming together. Where are we at on that aspect, Megan?
Yes, so the USDA Agricultural Research Service has really had several advancements in the last 2 years with regards to African swine fever virus vaccine development. They have, I believe, 2 vaccines that they have in various stages of clinical trials. They have current ongoing studies in Vietnam looking at the efficacy of the vaccine and potential commercialization. Now, there's likely still studies to be done with regards to safety and efficacy. And one of the aspects of the vaccine safety is that you want to make sure that there's no long-term harboring of the vaccine virus. And so they are in stages, though, and it's very exciting to think about the potential of a vaccine being commercialized and available to our pig populations.
Not there yet, though, to stress.
No.
So the biosecurity remains at a very high priority here. So
yes.
In your work, we wish you the best in looking at those on-farm methods of dealing with an African swine fever outbreak, and hopefully that'll lend us some information. It'll never have to be used.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us right here. She's an assistant professor of diagnostic medicine and pathobiology in K-State's College of Veterinary Medicine, Megan Niederwerder. Again, she'll be leading a project to look at African swine fever transmission and survivability in the on-farm setting using the Biosecurity Research Institute facilities here at Kansas State University to conduct that work. We'll have more for you shortly on Agriculture Today. Welcome back. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Now let's check this week's K-State Research and Extension agricultural events calendar. Here are some of the things coming up. 2 K-State crop pest management schools this week. And these will be in the traditional in-person format. The locations are this Wednesday the 8th in Colby at the City Limits Convention Center there, then Thursday the 9th in Great Bend at the Knights of Columbus Hall. These schools are to aid you producers as well as consultants and commercial applicators in identifying and managing crop diseases, insects, and weed problems. Might note that there will be continuing education credits for commercial applicators, and certified crop advisor credits will also be available. Each of these will start around 7:50 in the morning with registration. They'll conclude around 5 in the afternoon, and a lunch will be provided to all participating. The registration fee is $75, either pre-registering or at the door. You can go online to register at sunflower.ksu.edu/agronomy. Might note also that the same program will be presented virtually on Tuesday, December the 21st. At that same website, you can register for that if you're so inclined, sunflower.ksu.edu/agronomy. But the 2 in-person crop pest management schools this week, Wednesday in Colby, Thursday in Great Bend. Now, also on Wednesday the 8th, the Kansas Forage and Grassland Council, along with K-State Research and Extension, will be hosting the annual Winter Forage Conference. This will take place at the Harvey County 4-H building in Newton. They'll have a collection of specialists there talking about a variety of topics: alfalfa production, crabgrass production potential, ration supplementation with high grain prices, combating woody encroachment on native range, and they'll have a farmer panel discussing those producers' progressive approaches and alternative forage sources that are helping them extend their grazing seasons. Featured speakers include K-State's Justin Wagner, Romulo Lolato, and Bruno Pedreira, along with Doug Spencer of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. This event is free for current council members, $45 for non-members, but that fee includes a membership to the council as well as lunch. To find out more about this year's Winter Forage Conference, go to ksfgc.org. ksfgc.org. This is being sponsored by the Kansas Forage and Grassland Council and K-State Research and Extension. This Wednesday, the 8th, Harvey County 4-H building in Newton. They'll get going there at 9 o'clock that morning. And the next installment of a K-State Research and Extension Cattle Conversations series, as they're calling it, is coming up this Thursday. These are half-hour online sessions. They run from 10 to 10:30 in the morning, and there is no fee for taking any of these in. This next session on Thursday the 9th will feature co-grazing sheep and goats with cattle. K-State's Allison Crane will be making that presentation. You can visit the Central Kansas Extension District website for more information on this, or ask your local extension office likewise. Again, the latest in the Cattle Conversations series, Allison Crane of K-State on co-grazing, Thursday morning, starting at 10 o'clock. The program runs for a half an hour, online. And the rest of the series, for your information, will continue for the next 3 Thursdays afterward. The 16th, K-State's Greg Hanselcheck on early cow-calf health. The 23rd of December, K-State's Augustine Obour on utilizing cover crops for grazing and the impact on soil health. And the final segment in this series, put on by K-State's Sandy Johnson, on Thursday, January the 6th. She'll be talking there about reproductive performance of heifers after development in a dry lot or when grazing triticale. Again, find out more about this series on the Central Kansas Extension District website or inquire through your local extension office. Those are some of the K-State Research and Extension informational and educational opportunities ahead this week. And with that, our time's away once more. Thanks for tuning in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.